Hello, this is Ascendance here from 4FS Gaming. Now, every single game of Halo Wars 2 is different in some way. Despite claims that everyone uses the same blatantly overpowered Cansano Flamer Rush, this is a game of diversity. Now you, yes you, even if you are stuck somewhere below silver, can win every single game if you remember these 5 simple steps. Unless of course, your opponent does it better. Then you might have to stay in silver until you find yet another game-breaking OP glitch on Reddit. So without further ado, let's look at the 5 stages in every match of Halo Wars 2. The loading screen fades away, and the now outdated Xbox One console struggles to render the textures in time. I'm assuming you're playing this on Xbox One, because isn't the PC community dead already? You build your first resource building, and quickly instruct your 2 infantry units to start collecting those nearby magical blue boxes. Welcome to the setup phase, and the world, or at least the map, is your oyster. There are 3 simple rules to doing this step right. Firstly, you must always be building stuff on your base as fast as you can. Don't let it idle for 30 seconds without putting up that 3rd supply pad. Buildings that generate resources are more valuable the longer they are up and running, so don't start off with a barracks and armory and then wonder why you lost at the 4-minute mark. The second rule is never idle your units. If your grunts or marines are having a snooze for the first 5 minutes of the game, it's a bit like the hare and the tortoise, except the other player isn't a tortoise, they're also a hare, or maybe even a jackrabbit, no pun intended. They still don't take a nap either, so gather those resources, Marines, and range over the map to do a bit more scouting. The third rule comes into play at the end of the setup phase. Before 4 minutes, you need to be grabbing some power nodes and mini bases to give your economy a boost. Remember the magic rule of 3. 3 infantry squads to take a node. Otherwise, you are just being malicious to those poor grunts, and they'll get shredded by the sentinels. Congratulations, you have now survived the setup phase, along with pretty much every other player. What comes next I will simply refer to as the opener, because about 70% of this community gets triggered when anyone says the word rush. I'll say it again. Rush. The opener is when one player begins to put pressure on the other. Some people like to do this with a swarm of jackrabbits, or cheesy hammer brutes. But usually, if you round up all of your scattered infantry that you had out collecting resources and capturing nodes, you will be able to pick off a mini base or even an early expansion. The basic idea is to put your global rally point outside the enemy base and keep spamming cheap expendable units. It is at this point that you need to make some very important decisions. Do you move in for the kill, or can you simply contain your enemy? If you make the wrong choice, all of your careful planning, and by planning what I really mean is googling whichever cheap unit is OP in the current meta and spamming it, will fall apart. If you keep attacking their main base and fail, you will now be at a resource disadvantage. If you pull back away from those pesky turrets and use your units to contain the enemy to a small portion of the map, you will be at a resource advantage. However, if you pull back to contain when your opponent was defenseless, then you have lost the opportunity for a quick and easy win. Regardless, you should have put enough pressure on the enemy that by this point, you have achieved the next tech level. But what if I don't want to rush because I like games going for an hour and I like to have the moral high ground? Well, then you can always open defensively. Build some turrets, garrison some units, and try to counter whichever early rush your opponent will inevitably commit to while you stockpile power for that tech up and move on to the next stage of the game. So the the opener has stopped or lost its momentum. One or both players have achieved Tech 2, and it is now time for the transition phase. Now this is a very critical stage of the game. You now have a few more options. Actually, a lot more options. And you need to pick one type of unit to transition into so you can stay in the fight. But if your opponent picks your counter, it's going to be like Peppa Pig at the abattoir down there. So, scout the enemy base. Are there 2 garages? If so, go air. Actually, no don't, because then they'll spam wolverines. Go hunters or cyclops. Do they have a barracks? Now you can go air, because even though infantry is supposed to be super good against air, hardly any of them except core infantry can actually hit stuff that's in the air. Okay, so this just got confusing real quick. Basically, if you build the opposite of whatever the game tells you to do in the tooltips, it'll work just fine. You do, however, have to have some kind of consideration of what units you want to tech up as well. If you neglect to upgrade anything at all, you may find yourself throwing nothing but stones and angry noises, kinda like that one Ewok that died. If you transition really well, your opener can get a kind of second wind, after which you will be able to put a quick finish to the match. But often enough your opponent pulls out something that buggers you up, usually in the form of one of those broken tier 3 leader powers. Then you are left in a lengthy game of paper, scissors, rock, having to continually update your army composition to outcompete your opponent. You really need two things at this point to ensure victory. The first is a better economy, so basically not the kind of economy that you get by giving tax concessions to big business, but the other kind that actually comes from having more stuff. So don't worry, no more voodoo economics. You will also need better information than your opponent, otherwise all of the fruits of your economy will be wasted on Wolverines when there isn't a single aircraft in sight. So you should scout, a lot. Both of these can be achieved by the same principle, map control. Spread your units out over the map, keep them moving, shut down enemy expansions before they can fortify, protect your own stuff, destroy theirs, sounds pretty simple. And when you have enough momentum, move in for the kill. This brings us to the final phase of winning the game, the Merciless Final Assault. This is when you send all of your units to kill that enemy main base. Many players will surrender before this point, but those that are particularly stubborn may have to be defeated in a rather spectacular fashion. Make sure you time it right, when you know you have a much larger force than your opponent, and then quickly ensure that there are no other sneaky bases popping up around the map. Just be careful that you haven't completely miscalculated before you commit your forces, and make sure there isn't a pack of locusts popping your own bases back home. Of course, in the heat of battle, a lot of things can go wrong, but follow these 5 easy steps and you are guaranteed to win every game of Halo Wars 2 ever, unless your opponent also has viewed this video or uses an alternate and just as effective strategy. So basically there is no guarantee at all. Please stay tuned for more from 4FS Gaming and tell us what you think below in the comments.